The girl learned very early that life was not fair. She did not remember much about her real mother, only soft moments that felt like dreams. A gentle voice calling her name, warm hands fixing her hair, and a feeling of safety she could never explain. That safety disappeared when her mother passed away. After that, the house felt cold, even during summer. Her father tried his best at first. He worked long hours doing small jobs, coming home tired and silent. When he married again, people said it was for the child, so she would not grow up without a woman in the house. At the beginning, the new woman acted kind in front of others. She smiled, cooked meals, and spoke softly when neighbors were around. But inside the walls of the house, everything was different. The girl was still very young when she understood that she was not wanted. The woman never called her by loving words. She was ordered around like a servant. Every morning started before sunrise. The girl cleaned the floors, washed dishes, and prepared simple meals before getting ready for school. Many days, she went to class without breakfast. Her stomach hurting, but her face calm. School was the only place where she felt a little free. She loved learning, especially reading. Books helped her forget the pain at home. Teachers noticed she was quiet, but smart. Sometimes they asked why she looked tired, but she always smiled and said she was fine. She was scared that if she spoke the truth, things would get worse. When her father became sick, everything changed even more. He could no longer work regularly. Medical bills started to pile up. The woman complained every day about money. She blamed the girl for everything, saying that feeding her and paying for school was the reason they were poor. The girl listened silently, feeling guilt, even though she had done nothing wrong. After her father passed away, the house became a prison. There was no one left to protect her. The woman stopped pretending to be kind. She pulled the girl out of school, saying education was useless for someone like her. The girl cried quietly that night, holding her old books like they were pieces of her heart. From that day on, her life became only work. She cooked, cleaned, and sometimes worked small jobs outside to bring money home. Every coin she earned was taken from her hands. The woman kept reminding her that she owed everything to the roof over her head. There were days when the girl wondered if anyone in the world cared whether she lived or not. Neighbors noticed bruises sometimes. They heard shouting through thin walls. But no one stepped in. People were afraid of trouble. Others believed it was a family matter. The girl learned that silence was easier for everyone except the one who was suffering. Despite everything, the girl did not lose her kindness. She helped an old neighbor carry water. She shared food when she had some. She believed that being good was the only thing she truly owned. Even when the woman insulted her, calling her useless and unwanted, the girl did not answer back. As time passed, money became the woman's only concern. She talked about it constantly. She dreamed of an easy life without work. She complained that fate had been cruel to her. She never spoke about love, care, or responsibility. To her, people were tools, and everything had a price. One evening, after a long day of work, the girl overheard a conversation that made her heart race. The woman was talking to someone on the phone, her voice low and serious. She spoke about money, about a deal, about how desperate times required strong decisions. The girl did not understand everything, but she felt fear deep inside her chest. That night, the girl could not sleep. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about her life. She wondered if this was all she would ever know. Pain, silence, and endless work. She whispered a quiet prayer, not asking for riches or comfort, only asking for a chance to live with dignity. The next morning, the woman looked at her differently. There was no anger in her eyes, only calculation. It scared the girl more than shouting ever had. She felt like something important was about to change, and not in a good way. The woman began treating her better for the first time in years. She gave her clean clothes and spoke in a softer tone. The girl was confused but hopeful. She thought maybe things were finally improving. Maybe her prayer had been heard. But deep inside, the woman had already made her choice. It was a choice where money mattered more than humanity, where a young girl's pain meant nothing compared to financial relief. The girl, innocent and trusting, had no idea that her life was about to be pushed in a direction she never chose. As the sun set that evening, the girl stood by the window, watching the sky turn orange. She held on to hope, unaware that this hope would soon be tested in ways she could never imagine. And somewhere far away, unseen and unknown, fate was quietly preparing to step in. This was only the beginning of her story. A story of loss, betrayal, and survival. A story where pain would one day turn into power, even though right now, all she felt was fear and uncertainty. The change in the woman's behavior did not go unnoticed. For days, she watched the girl closely, as if studying her. She asked strange questions about her health, her habits, and where she went during the day. The girl answered honestly, still believing that kindness meant something. She did not know that this attention was not care, but preparation. The woman started talking often about money. She complained loudly about debts, about how unfair life had been to her. Sometimes she cried in front of the girl, wiping fake tears and saying how hard it was to survive. The girl felt sorry for her. Even after all the cruelty, she still believed that pain could change people. One afternoon, the woman sent the girl to the market with extra instructions. She told her to dress neatly and behave properly. The girl found this odd. Usually, no one cared how she looked. She wore the clean clothes without question. Her heart filled with confusion and quiet hope at the market. The woman spoke to several people while the girl stood beside her, silent. The girl noticed the way strangers looked at her, some with curiosity, others with pity. It made her uncomfortable, but she said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence kept her safe. That evening, the woman locked the door earlier than usual. She sat across from the girl and spoke in a serious tone. She said that hard times required sacrifice. She said that the girl owed her everything. Food, shelter, protection. The girl listened, her hands shaking slightly. The woman explained that an opportunity had come, a chance to solve their money problems. She spoke carefully, choosing words that hid the truth. She said the girl only needed to help for a short time, that it was for the good of the household. That refusing would mean being thrown out with nothing. Fear filled the girl's chest. She tried to understand, but the explanation felt incomplete. She asked if she would be safe. The woman smiled and said yes, but her eyes told a different story. The girl felt something break inside her at that moment. Trust, once lost, does not return easily. The next day, the woman took the girl to a place she had never been before. The road was long and quiet. The girl looked out the window, memorizing everything, just in case she needed to escape. Her heart beat fast, each second louder than the last. When they arrived, the woman spoke confidently as if she belonged there. She introduced the girl as if she were a possession. The girl lowered her eyes, feeling smaller than ever. She wanted to disappear. What hurt the most was not the situation itself, but the realization that she had been sold out by the one person who was supposed to protect her. Money had won. Humanity had lost. The woman received what she wanted. She did not look back. There was no guilt on her face, only relief. To her, the problem was solved. The girl's pain was just a detail. The girl felt abandoned. She felt powerless. But even in that dark moment, she held on to her dignity. She spoke politely, followed instructions, and kept her emotions hidden. Crying would not save her now. Time passed slowly. Every sound felt louder. Every movement felt heavier. She kept reminding herself that she was still a human being. Even if others treated her like an object, somewhere nearby, people noticed her presence. Not everyone ignored her pain. A few quiet looks lingered longer than expected. Someone saw fear in her eyes. Someone noticed the silence that spoke louder than words. The woman, far away by then, counted the money again and again. She convinced herself that she had done the right thing, that survival mattered more than feelings, that the world was cruel anyway. But actions leave marks. Choices create consequences. The girl, alone and unsure of her future, whispered another prayer. Not for rescue, but for strength. She promised herself that if she survived this moment, she would never let anyone treat her as worthless again. That night, she sat quietly, thinking about her past, about her mother's gentle voice, about school books she once loved, about dreams she was never allowed to dream. She did not know that her story was already changing direction. She did not know that someone with power and influence had begun asking questions. Someone who did not believe that money could excuse cruelty. Fate often moves silently. It watches. It waits. And while the woman slept peacefully with money beside her, the girl stayed awake, holding on to the one thing no one could take from her. Her humanity, this moment, marked the deepest point of her suffering. But it was also the point where the world would soon start watching, where truth would rise slowly but surely. What was meant to destroy her was quietly shaping her strength, and the decision made for money alone was about to bring consequences no one expected. The girl's days blended into nights. Every hour felt like a test of patience and courage. She followed the instructions given to her, careful not to make mistakes. The place she was taken to was unfamiliar, filled with strangers whose eyes were not kind. She learned quickly that silence kept her alive. Each polite word she spoke was measured, each movement deliberate. Despite her fear, she noticed small things that reminded her of the world she once knew. A stray cat outside the window, birds chirping in the early morning, a neighbor helping another without asking for anything in return. These small glimpses gave her a sense of hope, a reminder that cruelty did not exist everywhere. Meanwhile, the woman who had sold her felt no guilt. She spent her days counting money, speaking with friends about her cleverness. She believed she had one. But in her success, she failed to see that some actions have ripple effects. And what was done in darkness rarely stays hidden. The girl slowly realized that she had to find her own strength. She could not rely on anyone. Not her father, not the woman, not the strangers. She began paying attention to small details around her when people were kind. When someone showed patience, even in the smallest way. She memorized faces, streets, and routines. If she had to survive, she would need this knowledge. Days turned into weeks. The girl felt exhausted, her body and mind constantly under pressure. But inside her, a fire started to grow. A quiet determination that whispered, "I will not be broken." She remembered her mother's words about kindness and resilience, even though her mother was no longer there to protect her. One evening, while cleaning a large room filled with expensive furniture, she noticed a man sitting quietly, observing everything. He was not like the others. His presence felt different, calm, patient, and somehow gentle. He did not speak harshly or make demands. He simply watched, as if trying to understand. Curiosity sparked within the girl. She wondered why someone with so much power would pay attention to her. She thought about her situation, the unfairness, and how easily the woman had chosen money over her life. And yet this stranger did not judge her. He simply looked with interest and concern. She continued her work, but she felt eyes on her more than usual. Whenever she glanced, he would meet her gaze briefly and then return to his calm observation. It was strange and comforting at the same time. She felt seen in a way she had not been seen for years. The woman who had sold her began to grow impatient. She had expected immediate results from her deal, but things were not as simple as she imagined. She wanted control, but some things were beyond her reach. She did not notice that her actions were drawing attention from those who could influence outcomes in ways she could not control. The girl learned to hide her emotions behind a mask of obedience. But inside, she analyzed every word, every movement. She noted weaknesses, opportunities, and moments when she could speak up safely. Her mind became sharp, not with anger, but with understanding of the world's complexities. One afternoon, a conversation changed everything. The man who had been quietly observing approached her gently. He spoke softly, asking her questions that no one had ever asked before. He asked about her family, her dreams, her fears. She answered cautiously, still wary. But relief filled her heart to find someone who listened without judgment. Through small, careful conversations, she discovered that he cared not for money or appearances, but for people. He had seen many injustices, and his wealth was a tool, not a weapon. Slowly, she began to trust him. sharing pieces of her story that she had never told anyone. As trust built, she felt a sense of empowerment that had been missing for years. The girl realized that she could influence her own fate. She started thinking about ways to protect herself, to regain some control. Even in the face of cruelty, she was learning to strategize, to plan, to think ahead. Meanwhile, the woman who had betrayed her became more reckless. She continued to flaunt her money, speaking loudly about her cleverness, underestimating the power of consequences. She assumed that fear and manipulation would always work. She did not realize that the girl she had wronged was slowly gaining allies. Even if she did not yet know it, the girl began to observe human behavior more deeply. She noticed how kindness could disarm suspicion, how courage could shift situations, and how patience could reveal hidden opportunities. She was learning not only to survive, but to adapt. Every small observation became a lesson. Every interaction, a potential tool for her safety. Even as she navigated the challenges of her daily life, she kept her hope alive. She remembered her mother, the dreams she once had, and the small acts of kindness that reminded her that the world was not entirely cruel. This hope was a shield against despair, giving her the strength to endure and plan. In quiet moments, she would reflect on the woman who had chosen money over humanity. She felt anger, but she also felt clarity. She understood the difference between those who saw people as tools and those who saw people as human beings with worth. This clarity strengthened her resolve. Slowly, her situation began to shift. The presence of the kind man became more influential. He began to act subtly, creating moments where the girl could regain small amounts of independence. He asked questions, offered guidance, and quietly observed, without interference. The girl's resilience became evident in ways she had never imagined. She learned that true power comes not from money or fear, but from courage, intelligence, and the ability to remain human in the face of cruelty. Every challenge, every test, made her stronger, sharper, and more determined. Through patience and careful observation, she began to envision a life beyond fear, a life where she could reclaim her dignity and make choices for herself. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of control, a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. And while the woman who had betrayed her continued in her reckless ways, the girl quietly prepared for a future where her pain would not define her. She understood that strength often comes from suffering, and wisdom comes from learning how to navigate a cruel world without losing one's humanity. The girl's story was no longer just about survival. It was about transformation, about turning fear into courage, pain into strength, and helplessness into power. And as each day passed, she moved closer to the moment when she would no longer be a victim, but a force to be reckoned with, guided by her own principles and the quiet strength she had nurtured within herself. The girl had been living in this difficult situation for a long time, but every day brought new challenges. She learned to remain calm even when fear threatened to overwhelm her. She discovered that patience could be a weapon and observation a shield. Every small detail, every moment of silence, could teach her something important. As days passed, the kind man continued to watch over her discreetly. He never interfered directly, but he provided guidance in subtle ways. He asked questions that encouraged her to think, to plan, and to understand the power of her own actions. Slowly, the girl began to feel that she was not entirely alone, that there was someone who saw her for who she was, not for what she could do for others. Meanwhile, the woman who had betrayed her became more careless. She grew arrogant, believing that she had complete control over the girl and the situation. Her focus was on money, on appearances, on convincing herself that her actions were justified. But the world has a way of revealing truths. The girl's growing awareness was slowly becoming a force she could not control. The girl began to notice small openings in her daily life. A moment when a door was left unlocked, a distraction that allowed her to move more freely, a brief conversation with someone who showed unexpected kindness. These moments were small, but to her, they were windows of hope. She started to plan, quietly, carefully, never letting anyone see her intentions. One evening, while performing her chores, she overheard a conversation that made her heart race. The woman was speaking with someone about a new arrangement, a deal that involved more people and more money. The girl listened carefully, storing every word in her memory. She realized that knowledge was power, and the more she knew, the better she could protect herself. The kind man noticed her attention to detail. He began offering subtle advice through questions that made her think about consequences and choices. He did not act as a savior, but as a mentor, encouraging her to rely on her own intelligence and instincts. This approach gave her confidence and strengthened her sense of self. The girl's inner strength grew daily. She found moments to reflect on her life, to understand how far she had come despite the suffering. She thought about her mother, about the dreams she had once held, and about the lessons she had learned through pain. She realized that while she could not change the past, she could shape her future. In the evenings, she practiced patience, resilience, and courage. She rehearsed polite responses, careful movements, and strategies that could keep her safe. Each day became a lesson in survival and wisdom. She understood that fear could be transformed into awareness, and awareness could lead to freedom. The woman continued her schemes, unaware that the girl's quiet observation had turned into careful planning. She underestimated the girl's ability to think, to strategize, and to recognize opportunities. Her arrogance blinded her to the fact that cruelty often provokes consequences. Beyond immediate control, the girl found small allies in unexpected places. Some people noticed her silent strength, her dignity in the face of hardship, and offered small gestures of support. It could be a kind word, a helping hand, or simply a reassuring look. These acts reminded her that not everyone in the world was cruel, that even small kindness could fuel hope. One afternoon, the kind man invited her to a quiet conversation. He spoke of fairness, justice, and the power of integrity. He shared stories of people who had faced hardships yet emerged stronger. The girl listened intently, realizing that her journey was not only about enduring pain, but also about learning to rise above it. Through these interactions, she began to envision a life where she was no longer a victim. She imagined a future where she could make choices freely, pursue dreams, and help others who were suffering. Each thought fueled her determination, turning fear into action and despair into hope. The woman's recklessness eventually created cracks in her control. She made mistakes, trusted the wrong people, and underestimated the consequences of her choices. The girl watched quietly, ready to act when the right moment came. She understood that patience and observation were as powerful as courage and strength. One day, she was given a task that seemed ordinary but held great potential. The girl recognized the opportunity immediately. She executed the task carefully, using the knowledge she had accumulated and the guidance she had received. Every step was calculated, every decision deliberate. She realized that she was no longer entirely under the control of fear. Slowly, the girl's confidence grew. She saw herself not just as a survivor, but as someone capable of shaping her destiny. She understood the importance of timing, strategy, and human understanding. She learned that true strength comes not from reacting in anger, but from acting with wisdom. The world outside was vast and complex, filled with people of different intentions and desires. The girl began to navigate this world carefully, recognizing allies, identifying threats, and planning her next steps. Each action she took was informed by her experiences, her observations, and the subtle guidance she had received. Despite the challenges, she remained grounded in her humanity. She continued to act with kindness, patience, and integrity. These qualities, often overlooked by those driven by greed and cruelty, became her greatest assets. They allowed her to connect with others, to gain trust, and to find strength even in the darkest moments. The girl's journey was far from over, but she had already transformed. She had learned to turn pain into power, fear into strategy, and suffering into resilience. The cruel choices of the woman who had betrayed her were becoming irrelevant, overshadowed by the girl's growing awareness and strength. And while the world continued to test her, she faced each challenge with quiet determination. Every moment of observation, every act of patience, every small gesture of courage brought her closer to freedom and dignity. The girl was no longer a victim of circumstances, but a silent force. ready to reclaim her life and her future. The girl had reached a turning point. Every hardship she endured had shaped her, teaching her lessons that no school or book could ever offer. She was no longer the frightened child who had been sold for money. She had learned to watch, listen, and understand the world with clarity that few possessed at her age. One morning, the kind man approached her with a plan. He spoke quietly, explaining how she could slowly regain her freedom without alerting the woman who had betrayed her. The girl listened carefully, her mind racing with possibilities. Every word was an opportunity, every suggestion a step toward reclaiming her life. She began by observing the routines of those around her with even greater focus. She memorized times, patterns, and vulnerabilities. She understood that patience and careful planning were her greatest weapons. The woman who had exploited her remained blind to the growing intelligence and resolve in the girl. Thinking that fear still controlled her, small victories built her confidence. A successful task executed without the woman's knowledge. A conversation navigated with cleverness. A tiny freedom gained through careful timing all contributed to her sense of empowerment. The girl realized that she had power, not through wealth, but through knowledge, patience. In courage, the kind man guided her subtly, never interfering directly but providing advice that sharpened her instincts. He helped her see possibilities she might have missed, taught her to anticipate challenges, and encouraged her to act with precision. Under his mentorship, she became strategic, thoughtful, and determined. The girl also began to notice patterns in human behavior that previously escaped her. She saw how fear could be used to manipulate, how kindness could disarm suspicion, and how intelligence could outmaneuver greed. She understood that these lessons would serve her not just now, but for the rest of her life. One evening, while performing a routine task, she saw an opportunity. The woman had grown complacent, careless, and arrogant. She left doors unlocked, conversations unguarded, and displayed her wealth and power openly. The girl recognized this as a chance to reclaim control, and she acted quietly, methodically, ensuring that every step would work in her favor. Using the skills she had developed over months of careful observation, the girl maneuvered through the house and the lives of those around her. She collected evidence of the woman's selfishness, cruelty, and manipulations. Each piece strengthened her understanding that she was capable of changing her circumstances as she gathered knowledge. She also built subtle alliances. People who had noticed her dignity and resilience began to assist her in quiet ways. They offered information, small resources, and moral support. These small acts of kindness reminded her that while some people are cruel, there are always those who act with integrity and empathy. The woman, blinded by arrogance, never suspected that the girl was preparing to reclaim her life. She continued to flaunt money, boast about cleverness, and underestimate the strength of someone she had thought powerless. But the girl's patience and strategy were quietly weaving a web that the woman could not see. One crucial day, the girl executed a plan that brought clarity to her situation. She moved carefully, used the information she had gathered, and created a situation where the truth about the woman's actions could no longer be hidden. She acted without malice, guided by intelligence and courage, ensuring that justice would follow without unnecessary harm. The results were transformative. The woman's schemes were exposed, her power weakened, and her control diminished. The girl, through patience, intelligence, and moral strength, had turned the tables. She had transformed her suffering into power, proving that human resilience is greater than cruelty when combined with wisdom and courage. In the aftermath, the girl reflected on her journey. She understood that every hardship had taught her something invaluable: patience, observation, kindness, courage, and intelligence. She realized that true power comes not from wealth or manipulation, but from maintaining humanity in the face of adversity. The kind man recognized her growth and independence. He no longer needed to guide her, as she had become capable of navigating her life with confidence and clarity. She had reclaimed her dignity, her freedom, and her future. The girl's story, once marked by fear and exploitation, had transformed into a story of empowerment and resilience. She had turned pain into wisdom, suffering into strength, and betrayal into a lesson on human integrity. The woman who had chosen money over humanity had lost her influence, while the girl had gained something far greater control over her own life as she stepped into a new chapter. The girl understood that her journey was far from ordinary. It was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, the power of patience, and the importance of holding on to kindness and integrity even when the world seems cruel. She had endured, learned, and emerged stronger, ready to live a life guided by her own principles, resilience, and the wisdom born from experience. The girl had transformed completely from the frightened child who had once been betrayed. She had endured years of hardship, cruelty, and fear. Yet each struggle had strengthened her mind, sharpened her instincts, and deepened her understanding of people. She had learned that survival was not only about hiding or obeying, but about seeing clearly, thinking carefully, and acting with intelligence. Her life was now filled with decisions she could make for herself. The girl had grown independent, capable of navigating the world with wisdom born from experience. She had discovered that, while some people are selfish and cruel, there are also those who act with kindness, honesty, and integrity. Recognizing these differences became her guiding principle. The woman who had sold her for money no longer held any power. The girl had exposed her actions and weakened her influence, demonstrating that greed and cruelty often carry consequences. The woman's arrogance had blinded her to the girl's resilience, and now she was left with only the empty satisfaction of short-term gain. The girl had turned suffering into empowerment, learning the value of patience, strategy, and moral strength. Even in freedom, the girl remained grounded in her humanity. She understood that true power does not come from dominating others, but from maintaining dignity, acting with integrity, and helping those who cannot help themselves. Each choice she made reflected the lessons she had learned: courage in the face of fear, patience during challenges, and kindness even when surrounded by cruelty. One morning, she walked through a quiet garden, reflecting on her journey. The sun shone gently, birds sang in the trees, and she felt the peace she had longed for all her life. She remembered the years of hardship, the fear, and the endless work, and realized that every step had shaped her into someone stronger. She had survived because she never gave up hope, because she never allowed herself to lose sight of her own worth. She thought about the kind man who had guided her subtly, never taking credit for her success, but teaching her the importance of wisdom and observation. His presence had been a steady light, showing her that not everyone in the world was cruel and that guidance can come without dominance. She felt gratitude for his quiet mentorship and the lessons he had imparted. With newfound freedom, the girl began helping others in ways she could. She provided guidance, support, and hope to those who were struggling. She shared the lessons she had learned about patience, observation, and courage. Her experience had shown her that even small acts of kindness can make a significant difference in someone's life. She also used her understanding of human behavior to influence positive change. She helped people see the value of honesty and integrity, showing that power used for good can transform lives. Her wisdom, born from suffering, became a source of inspiration for others who faced challenges similar to those she had endured. Despite the peaceful life she was building, the girl never forgot her past. The pain, fear, and betrayal remained as memories, but they no longer controlled her. Instead, they served as reminders of her resilience, strength, and capacity for growth. She had learned that suffering is not meaningless if it is used to cultivate wisdom, courage, and compassion. In her daily life, she made careful choices, guided by her principles. She prioritized actions that upheld her dignity and respected the humanity of others. She refused to allow greed, fear, or cruelty to dictate her decisions. Her life became a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of acting with integrity. The world continued to present challenges, but the girl faced them with confidence. She relied on the lessons she had learned to observe carefully, act strategically, and maintain compassion. Every obstacle became an opportunity to demonstrate courage and wisdom. Her past suffering became a foundation for a life of strength and influence. She also began documenting her experiences, not to dwell on pain, but to provide guidance and hope for others. She wrote about patience, courage, and moral strength, emphasizing that true power lies in remaining human even when circumstances are cruel. Her story became a beacon for those seeking inspiration and resilience in the face of adversity. In her interactions with others, the girl displayed empathy, understanding, and respect. She helped those who were vulnerable, guided those who were uncertain, and encouraged those who had lost hope. Her presence inspired confidence and trust, demonstrating that even in a harsh world, kindness and integrity can create meaningful impact. Through all her efforts, she continued to grow. Her mind became sharper, her judgment more refined, and her emotional strength unshakable. She learned to balance caution with action, wisdom with compassion, and independence with connection. Every choice she made reinforced her identity as someone who had endured suffering and emerged stronger. The girl's journey from fear to empowerment became a story not only of survival, but of transformation. She had taken the worst experiences of her life and turned them into lessons of strength, courage, and moral clarity. She had reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her future. In the end, she understood that while money, power, and manipulation can shape lives temporarily, true strength comes from the mind and heart. Her experiences had taught her that resilience, wisdom, and humanity are the greatest tools anyone can possess. She was no longer a victim, but a force of quiet power, capable of shaping her own destiny and helping others do the same. And as she looked toward the future, she did so with confidence, grace, and hope. Her past had shaped her, but it did not define her. She had turned pain into purpose, betrayal into insight, and fear into courage. The girl had become a living example of the strength of the human spirit, a testament to the power of patience, observation, and unwavering integrity. The girl had grown into a young woman who carried strength, wisdom, and compassion in every step she took. Her experiences had left marks, both visible and invisible, but they had also forged an unshakable character. She had learned to navigate the complexities of human behavior, to anticipate danger, and to recognize opportunities for growth and help. Every moment of her life had taught her lessons that were now her tools. In the quiet mornings, she reflected on her journey. She remembered the pain of betrayal, the loneliness, and the fear that had once consumed her. She understood that these memories were not weaknesses, but reminders of how far she had come. Each hardship had honed her instincts, strengthened her resolve, and nurtured a sense of empathy that could not have existed without those experiences. The world around her began to feel different. She noticed small acts of kindness more than cruelty, and she saw potential in people that others overlooked. This perspective allowed her to build connections carefully, choosing allies who respected integrity and honesty. She became a subtle leader in her own way, inspiring trust and admiration without seeking attention or praise. Her past experiences made her cautious, yet they did not make her fearful. She had learned that fear could be a tool when controlled, a signal to act wisely rather than impulsively. The woman who had once betrayed her and used greed to control her no longer had any influence. Her schemes were revealed, and her arrogance had been her downfall. The young woman understood that actions driven by cruelty and selfishness rarely go unpunished in the long run. She began to focus on creating stability in her life. She sought opportunities that aligned with her values, that allowed her to grow intellectually, emotionally, and socially. She understood that true independence was not just escaping abuse, but building a life where she could make choices freely and meaningfully. Her determination to live authentically became her guiding principle, the kind man who had quietly guided her throughout her hardships remained a mentor and friend. He continued to offer subtle advice, encouraging her to think critically, plan carefully, and act with both courage and integrity. She valued his presence not as someone to rescue her, but as a source of insight and perspective that complemented her growing wisdom. The young woman also began helping others who were facing hardships similar to her own. She shared her experiences and strategies, teaching patience, observation, and strategic thinking. Her guidance was practical, focusing on resilience and self-respect, showing that survival was only the first step, and that empowerment came from learning to reclaim one's own life. Through these efforts, she gained confidence in her ability to influence positive change. She discovered that compassion, combined with strategic action, could create meaningful impact. Her life became an example of how someone who has endured suffering could turn adversity into a force for good as she navigated her new life. She encountered challenges that tested her resilience and judgment. Some people tried to take advantage of her kindness, while others doubted her capabilities. Yet she met these obstacles with a balance of caution and courage, using the lessons of her past to guide her decisions. She learned that true strength is not about avoiding difficulties, but about facing them with clarity and integrity. The young woman also explored her creative and intellectual passions. She read widely, wrote her reflections, and engaged with ideas that broadened her understanding of the world. These pursuits were not only fulfilling, but also allowed her to process her experiences and transform them into wisdom. She understood that personal growth required nurturing both the mind and the heart. Her relationships with others deepened as she continued to act with honesty and empathy. People who had initially been distant or cautious began to trust her, recognizing the authenticity and strength she carried. She built a supportive network of friends and allies who shared her values and respected her independence. In time, she took on larger responsibilities, guiding community initiatives and helping those in need. Her leadership was quiet but effective, rooted in the understanding that influence comes from integrity and compassion rather than dominance or fear. She inspired others to act with courage and honesty. Demonstrating the power of resilience and moral clarity, the young woman's life was now a balance of independence, responsibility, and meaningful action. She had learned to enjoy simple, joyous morning walks, quiet reading, thoughtful conversation, while also engaging in purposeful work that improved her surroundings. She embraced life fully, appreciating both its beauty and its challenges. Her journey had transformed her perception of suffering. She no longer saw pain as a purely negative force, but as an experience that could cultivate strength, wisdom, and empathy. She understood that adversity, while difficult, often provided the tools necessary for growth and empowerment. Through her efforts, she began to leave a lasting impact on the people around her. She offered guidance, support, and hope, teaching that true resilience is about maintaining humanity in the face of adversity. She demonstrated that even the deepest wounds could be transformed into sources of strength and inspiration as she looked toward the future. She did so with confidence and clarity. She had learned that the world was complex, that people were capable of both cruelty and kindness, and that success was not about wealth alone, but about maintaining integrity, courage, and compassion. Her past had shaped her, but it did not define her. She had become the author of her own life story. In the final reflection of this chapter of her life, she recognized the power of choice. She had chosen to act with wisdom, to maintain dignity, and to help others. Her choices had led to empowerment, transformation, and the opportunity to make a positive impact. She understood that her experiences, once painful and frightening, had become the foundation for a life filled with purpose, strength, and humanity.